Well, we're looking at some big changes in the eastern part of the United States, both short and long term in the pattern. We've got a powerful storm that's going to develop this weekend and impact New England and eastern Canada and directly and indirectly alter our weather here in the eastern part of the United States. A cold front is marching eastward even as we speak, and we will be talking about this and maybe do a little bit of long range on the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, the 5th of October, 2023. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. Serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area. They've got mulch, topsoil, and sand. Before you know it, you're going to need salt to get rid of all the snow we're going to get, supposedly. And, of course, if you want to make sure your home can stand up to any storm, you can head over to Omni for what you need. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. We're only less than 3 months to Christmas. This makes a wonderful Christmas gift or a Hanukkah gift. Great gift for a kid who wants to learn about science and weather. And if you do decide to get one, use the referral code that's at the top of the chat board, or it's on the descriptor to this video. The coupon code is I want a weather station. Use it. And if you do, you'll get
a big 10% off.
And starting tonight, the Joe and Joe Weather Show airs as a podcast on YouTube Music. So welcome to those of you who are listening to the Joe and Joe Weather Show on YouTube Music.
That sounds great.
It's exciting.
More people to get weather informed from us.
That's correct, Mr. Rayo. So it's Thursday night, and this is our last night of the week. We are off tomorrow and Saturday. Welcome to those of you who are on the chat board tonight, and to those of you who are lurking in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show taking notes, but you don't want us to know who you are, but we know you're there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and make sure you turn your notifications on by ringing that little bell that's at the top corner of the YouTube page. And if your notifications are turned on, you will not miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show again, Monday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays we're off, but if there's a big storm impacting eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, or maybe anywhere on the East Coast, if it's big enough, we're big enough to be there.
Well, I guess we've been on for what, the last 3 Saturdays, so
yes, we have.
We're actually going to get a Saturday off.
No, were we on last Saturday? I don't know. We're on last Saturday.
We were on last Saturday.
We were.
I thought we were. Oh, wait a minute. No, we had the flooding rains on
Friday.
And then we took Saturday, Sunday, and
Monday off. Yeah, so, we do move the schedule around sometimes, but we will let you know. So,
what confused me was the fact that we don't normally do Fridays as well as Saturdays.
Yes.
We did do Friday last week, so here we are.
Yes.
We did the last 3 Fridays, I think.
Yes, that is true.
There you go.
Rather an unusual situation going on in the East Coast, because we really have 3 weather systems that are in play here. Oftentimes it's just the one. Sometimes you're looking at 2, but we're actually looking at 3 different weather systems here that are all going to combine into one lovely storm by the time it gets up into New England. And it's a storm that's actually it's going to accelerate the pattern change that we're going to see, because it will transition us to what was an above normal temperature week to the exact opposite starting Sunday and lasting, I would say, at least through all of next week and next weekend, and probably for the most part, and probably beyond that from some of the things I was looking at in the long range. Very interesting looking long range pattern setting up for this month of October, Mr. Rayo.
Well, just jumping quickly ahead to next weekend, it was at one time looking like we had some kind of a coastal storm system. It's looking more and more now, Joe, like a a very sharp, strong cold front that's going to be working its way across the Atlantic seaboard late Friday and Saturday of next weekend, not this weekend.
All right. I did notice today that it has a bit of a different look to it. It wants to cut it off after the front goes by. It's gotten a little more complex on some of the runs. I think we're at that point though where the models are sort of moving puzzle pieces around and trying to figure out which ones are the ones that fit and which ones are the ones that don't. And I think one of the keys to whatever happens next weekend is what's happening this weekend, because this system is going to go into eastern Canada, especially aloft, and just sit there all week long. There's going to be a large upper air storm in eastern Canada. The longer that takes to get out of the way, the more likely that we would see a scenario where we'd get a sharp cold front coming through and then maybe deal with stuff after the front goes by, as opposed to getting some kind of coastal low or a deep low to the Great Lakes. Because that was the one impression that I got when I was looking deep at the models today, was the fact that that upper low in eastern Canada is pretty strong, and it takes longer and longer for it to get out of the way. So that, I think, will probably hold the key to what happens next week. But all the models are still pointing to something happening next weekend. That remains the same. You hear me, Sal Blandino? Do you hear that? Just checking.
I hear silence.
Well, because when I stop talking, that's your cue.
Oh, well, what more am I going to add to that?
You can agree with me. You can expound on what I've said.
All right, I agree. Back to you, Joe.
This is not the Hollywood Squares, by the way. Frank Scalera, the first to hit the tip jar tonight. Thank you, Frank. Most appreciated as always. And the chairman, Scott Briller, hitting Super Chat tonight. And just to let everybody know that Monday, we're going to have a special a special Briller Jeopardy here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. That will be the Little House on the Prairie edition. So that's going to leave me out because
you asked for it, Christina Pedia. She was the one who
wanted it. She gets it.
Yeah.
Sandy Blue Ocean. We hope you are feeling better, because you've been under, and we hope you are recovering nicely. So, on that note, let's get on with it. But I was saying we've got 3 weather systems to deal with. And in fact, let me bring up the satellite loop so we could point them out. And it's very interesting because you've got this tropical storm Philippe, which is bringing tropical storm conditions now to Bermuda. And at the same time, when you look at it on the satellite loop, the visible part of the loop on the first few frames, you can notice that the low-level center is pretty well exposed, but there's a lot of convection. And then if you to the west of that is a non-tropical low that is beginning to develop. And at the end of the day, Joe, it doesn't really matter which system becomes dominant, because the finish is going to be the same, and that is a deepening low that's going to run up northward and then turn northwestward into the Gulf of Maine and move into Maine, either as and more than likely as a post-tropical cyclone. But it's going to be a strong system when it does that. So for eastern Maine, for Atlantic Canada, probably going to have to deal with some wind issues, and for much of Maine and northern New England, and also in upstate northern New York and north central New York, probably going to be dealing with the potential for some heavy rain and flash flooding again.
It's been getting, what's the word I'm looking for? It's getting monotonous that every single time we come to a weekend, we cannot sit here and say, beautiful weather, nice weather for Saturday and Sunday. Every weekend and it's not just the fact that it's going to be unsettled part of the time at least, and sometimes all of the time. But I mean, a lot of these systems have tropical DNA in them, tropical characteristics. And here we go again, another system which very much looks like the kind of track that Lee took a few weeks ago relative to eastern Maine and extreme western sections of Nova Scotia. It looks like Philippe is going to take basically the same kind of track. It's going to come north and actually at the last moment curve a little bit to the northwest, and this time may actually get into the extreme eastern portions of Maine, such as Eastport, Maine, when it makes landfall over this upcoming weekend.
Now, the offshore system did a favor to much of the East Coast because you've got this cold front that's coming. You've got all this development offshore. So in between, there was just enough subsidence and dry air to allow for one last day of sunshine before we start to deal with that cold front that is marching its way across Ohio and into western Pennsylvania. And you can see that the cloud line extends all the way back down into. Actually, you can follow that whole cloud line into the subtropical jet that's coming out of the Pacific and going into Mexico and Texas. I mean, this whole setup is very involved.
It is, and we did have a decent day here today. Not as hot as yesterday. Yesterday here in Putnam Valley, we got to 85. Today, Joe, still not bad for the 5th day of October. 78, though, 7 degrees cooler, thanks to an onshore easterly or east-southeasterly wind. And we're going to have a onshore airflow to deal with for tonight and on into tomorrow as well. Also had some patchy areas of dense fog again this morning, and that quickly burned off.
And likely see it tomorrow morning. I did notice, by the way, if you look on the loop, there's a area of low clouds. You know, it was foggy throughout much of southeastern New England for a good part of the day today, and it looks like there's another fog bank that's coming in from off the ocean and moving westward, almost down to eastern Long Island. You can see it there on the enhanced loop, that bluish area that's coming back westward.
Right.
Marine flow can do that.
It does do that, especially as I've been noting, especially at this time of the year in October. This is the time of the year when, ironically, it usually is very clear thanks to high pressure that is in control, prevalent. But in the same token, because there's not much in the way of winds, usually, that allows for the development of some fog, local fog, ground fog, dense fog, in some cases in the after midnight and early morning hours. We've seen that for the last few mornings.
Nice weather out in the west. We don't want to forget our friends in the west who've had more than their share of unusual things happen this summer with a tropical storm that moved up into California. But now it's nice and sunny throughout much of the southwest. Well, the sun's going to be setting soon, but the west coast is still dealing with sunshine right now and clear skies. You see the sunset line moving through on the satellite loop. Here's what the surface map looks like at 5 o'clock this afternoon. You've got a strong high that's sitting east of Nova Scotia and south of Newfoundland that's wedged down the eastern seaboard. The coastal lows offshore and the tropical storm are off the map, so we really can't see it in terms of the analysis. But there's a cold front that's analyzed in east central Ohio, and then it kind of waves stationary on the Canada side of the St. Lawrence River and north of Vermont and New Hampshire. And then this front runs down through central Tennessee, northwest Alabama, then kind of waves around through Louisiana and then back down off into the Gulf of Mexico. The second front, they've got a front drawing in between. It might be one that's weakening. And the second front, which is the stronger one, this one is back through central Lake Superior and runs southward through Wisconsin and then southwestward across Missouri into northern Oklahoma and northern Texas, and then swings back, cuts Colorado in half, and then runs stationary up the Rockies. The radar tonight, and we don't have any severe weather, Joe. We do have some showers and a few rumbles of thunder at the moment. In eastern Ohio, you can see the radar has rather active looking. I'm going to just quickly refresh this just to make sure I got the latest one. I mean, you got some pretty hefty cells there. This is the time of year where, unless you have an unusual circumstance or a tropical storm or hurricane making landfall, severe weather does tend to wind down a bit. It's just natural as we go deeper into the colder seasons. You usually start to see less and less in the way of severe weather. But there it is in terms of thunderstorms, nothing severe. And those downpours extend southward into Kentucky and Tennessee, Mississippi, and northwest Alabama, kind of a break there in Louisiana. Then it picks up again in South Texas, where there's some heavy rains going on inland. And then up in the northern plains and in the western lakes, oh, there's a severe thunderstorm warning up. Well, I was at a special marine warning. A special marine warning there for that part of Wisconsin with Lake Superior there. I'm not sure what city that is or what town is there, and some scattered patches of showers across Minnesota and North Dakota. And as we said, the Storm Prediction Center is they're not worried about any severe weather tonight. No severe organized severe thunderstorms are forecast tonight, nor are there any forecasts for tomorrow. Although, Joe, they have that we noted yesterday that they had those thunderstorms drawn on the outline of Lake Michigan. They've kind of shifted it eastward to include western Michigan on the lower peninsula. And they've drawn in an area of general storms, and I'm thinking this is probably for overnight Friday night into early Saturday morning in upstate New York and down across eastern and central Pennsylvania. It's like somebody's pushing their index finger down from north to south. I don't know. I'm not overly enthused on the idea of there might be some convection. I guess if we could see it tonight, on the radar in eastern Ohio, I suppose we could see it on Friday night in those inland areas that SPC has indicated.
I think that there's a chance that we may see some convection here locally on Saturday. If it does happen, I think it's more likely to happen in the early part of the day ahead of the cold front. And in fact, the temperatures on Saturday, Joe, could be interesting to watch. We may see temperatures in the upper 60s to near 70, but then after the frontal passage, it would not surprise me a bit if later in the day on Saturday we saw the temperatures take a little bit of a tumble, maybe back into the mid or low 60s by later Saturday afternoon. And, that front may be the triggering mechanism. I noticed some of the models have been suggesting that there could be a localized line of moderate to maybe even heavy shower activity moving on through during the early part of the day through eastern New York. This has nothing to do, or I don't think it has anything to do with Philippe, which will be battering extreme eastern New England or up into Maine. But if we do get any kind of significant rain on Saturday, locally, it would probably come from that front. And I do notice also, Joe, that WPC has placed our area being the New York and lower Hudson Valley area, in a slight risk for flash flooding on Saturday.
I got to think the threshold for flash flooding is pretty low with all the rain we've had.
Well, yeah. We've had so much rain. I mean, the second wettest September on record. However, October so far has been very nice. We've had a string of dry, pleasantly warm, and sunny days. But that's going to quickly come to an end tomorrow. I don't really think tomorrow. I mean, we'll see a few spot showers tomorrow. I think nothing really significant or heavy. After midnight tomorrow night till about, I think, noontime on Saturday is when we could pick up, I don't know, anywhere from 1 to maybe 2/3 of an inch of rainfall. And it might come down heavy for a brief interval of time, but nothing. And I want to stress this again, nothing like what we went through at the end of last week when parts of the tri-state area had upwards to 7, 8, even 9 inches of rain.
SPC does have it. They put it in today. I was a little surprised they didn't do it yesterday, but they put it in today. They've got an area of general thunderstorms, the southern half of Maine, much of New Hampshire, half of Vermont, all of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, the Hudson Valley going up almost to the Vermont state line, Long Island, New York City, almost all of New Jersey, and the eastern portion of Delaware and the Delmarva Peninsula, and easternmost North Carolina. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, it wouldn't be a shocker, as you said. There might be early on Saturday you get some heavier downpours that maybe there'll be a thunderstorm or two in the mix, but nothing severe is anticipated. And the rainfall forecast from WPC. And as Joe indicated, and I'll bring that map up in a moment, I just wanted to just make this one a little bigger. But you can see the rainfall forecast for the Northeast, particularly for Maine. where we're seeing minimum inch and a half, and those areas in red and that little orange dots that you see in north central Maine, that's 3 inches plus. So they are expecting substantial rains. Also substantial rains for much of Quebec province, going back to the Ontario line, Joe. This is with this big upper low and the surface storm that's going to go with it. The half-inch rain line cuts off just right across north central Jersey and western Long Island, and then you go further south, and it's basically hardly anything with the front, and then the rains pick up again. Now there's different things going on here with respect to what you see in the Gulf of Mexico and over the state of Florida, where rainfall looks to be substantial, particularly in east coastal and southeast Florida, and then up on the west coast as well, with at least a few inches of rain indicated. West is not doing too much. The central Rockies in Colorado a little on the busy side, and the Pacific Northwest a little bit on the busy side with rainfall over the next 7 days. So let me bring up WPC for our friends in New England who are watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show, or perhaps listening to us on YouTube music. So this is the flash flood risk graphic, and tonight it's down in South Texas and into Louisiana, and I'm sure the folks in Louisiana would love to get a soaking rain. They're having huge problems, Joe, with the salinity of the water because the Mississippi River is the drinking water, and because the rainfall this summer has been so lacking that the salt waters of the Gulf of Mexico have actually pushed their way inland into that place where they tap the water for drinking. There's a natural barrier that keeps that salinity area, the saltier water from the Gulf of Mexico, basically out of that part of the Mississippi River. But because of how dry it's been and how low the river is and the tides, that salt water has pushed all the way inland, and they're having, this is a problem that they haven't really had to face, and they're having to sort of retrofit water plants in order to process all of this, in order to process and get the salt out of the water and make it drinkable. It's a very serious situation down in southeast Louisiana.
I don't want to interrupt, but if you want to give me sharing capabilities, I'll show you what and today was the day when they update the drought map, and I'll show you exactly, echoing what you've just said, Joe, what they're having a problem with down there in the Gulf coastal areas of Louisiana.
You have sharing capabilities, Mr. Rayo.
All right, and here we go. I hope this all comes up properly. Did it come up?
It's there. Okay. It flashed a few times, but it's there.
So you can see here that in this area, and look at this. I wonder if I can highlight Louisiana. There you go. Oh my goodness, that's perfect. So you see here that all of this area in exceedingly dark red is exceptional drought. That is as high up on the scale in terms of drought intensity as you can go. I mean, the next thing after that is no data, but we certainly have more than enough data here. And regular red or bright red is extreme drought. And then you go up here into northern sections of Louisiana, and you have simply severe drought. And up here, the yellow, that's abnormally dry. So you literally have to go all the way up to the northernmost part of Louisiana to see just simply an abnormally dry. Otherwise, the entire state is going through anywhere from extreme to severe drought. And it's not just Louisiana, by the way. I mean, adjacent areas of Texas, central and east Texas, and also into southern and western sections of Mississippi, also going through a spell of extreme to exceptional drought. So it is bad news down there. They could use any kind of moisture they can get their hands on. And yeah, I can see why, Joe, you say that they're hoping for some of the rain from the next couple of days down there, because they certainly could use it.
It's an extremely uncommon occurrence for them to have a drought in southeast Louisiana where it's a swamp.
Right.
And it rains every day in the summertime. I mean, you could set your clock to the 3 o'clock thunderstorm.
Right.
It just always happens. But this year, with the way the upper air set up, with the big, the ridge that kept, pretty much oscillating back and forth across the lower Gulf states and back to the southwest, back to the lower Gulf states, back to the southwest, there was just nothing. And they've had no tropical activity to speak of in the Gulf of Mexico, really. I mean, we had Idalia, but that was on the Florida Panhandle. I'm sorry, on the Florida Big Bend. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those years where you get uh, all the activity has been really pretty much out in the Atlantic and recurving. There's been not hardly anything going into the Caribbean. There's hardly anything there's been nothing in the Gulf of Mexico. And you get years like that. I can remember stretches in the Gulf of Mexico where you went 3 years, 2 or 3 years without seeing a named system, and then it makes it up where you all of a sudden one year you got 5 or 6. So
And Frank R is right. Frank R writes on the chat board there were no tropical systems in that area this hurricane season, and that
yep,
makes all the difference in the world.
yep, absolutely. All right. So speaking of tropical systems here, why don't we take a look at the latest on Philippe, which is it's not a well-developed system by any stretch of the imagination. They carrying 50-mile-an-hour winds, but those winds are occurring well east of where the circulation center is. And the 8 o'clock advisory is at 27.5 and 66. Top winds, as we said, 50. Now moving north a little faster at 14 miles an hour. And we've got tropical storm warnings up for Bermuda. The center is likely to pass just to the west of Bermuda, but everything right now is on the east side. And really, this system is if this system strengthens, which is possible, it's going to strengthen, Joe, because of that deep upper trough that's moving into the eastern part of the United States. It's going to have what we call baroclinic intensification, which is how non-tropical systems strengthen, and it will feed on some of that energy that might cause it to strengthen a bit. And then you see how the Hurricane Center has it post-tropical by Saturday afternoon before it even reaches 40 degrees north. It's a little bit, they usually last a little longer than that, but with that non-tropical system to the west of it probably will transition faster. But it does, again, want to emphasize that it really doesn't change. If we weren't talking about a tropical storm here, if we were talking about a non-tropical storm taking a track up the east coast and then turning northwestward and then hooking back into the Gulf of Maine, the weather you would be getting would be the same. You wouldn't know the difference.
No, and that turn, as I mentioned a little while ago, that turn to the left somewhat mimics what would lead, although this one really turns to the left. You mentioned all of that heavy rain over Quebec. Well, you look at that path from Sunday through Sunday morning, early Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon, and all of that tropical moisture, frictional drag, literally getting wrung out, if you will, over the state of Maine and on into New Brunswick, and then crossing over the St. Lawrence Seaway into Quebec, and that'll do it. That'll bring down some very heavy rainfall, and that's why we're looking for that to happen this weekend from yet another tropical system interacting with parts of eastern New England and Atlantic Canada.
70 likes so far, Joe. Thank you for those of you who've hit the like button, as we are now at 5 minutes after 8 Eastern Time here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Joe and I love it when we get to 100 likes. So if you like the show, hit the like button and, help us get over 100, because that would be a good thing. Daniel Fitzsimmons, Joe, brings up there's a weather station that I think you've mentioned, that you've mentioned before in Mohonk, the Mohonk Preserve.
Yeah, the Mohonk Mountain House, and they've
Right.
been keeping weather records there at the Mohonk Preserve since the 1890s.
Now, he asks whether there's one or if there's something like that on Long Island. Now, I don't know of anything. The only thing that just came to mind was that there was that weather observer in Where
I
was
know.
it? In West Hampton, or no, not West Hampton,
I know who you're
Bridgehampton.
talking
In
about.
Bridgehampton.
Yeah, and he was like almost like 100 years old, right?
Yes. But I
I know.
don't know that anybody took it. Oh, I don't know. Has he passed? Has he left us?
Yes,
He's no longer with us.
he's now recording in a different sector of the universe.
Right. In Kelvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone has taken over that particular station, and I'm sure there are some others. I just that's the only one that comes to mind. I just wanted to give you that answer for you, Daniel. Thank you for the question. I did get your email and I did respond. Okay, so
For many years at Mohonk, the gentleman who took the observations was a man by the name of Dan Smiley. Mohonk Mountain House is owned by the Smiley family. They found it back in the 1860s, and Dan Smiley was their local naturalist, and he kept records not just of the weather, but he also kept records about nature and like how many times does the tree frogs peep or the peepers come out? What time of the year they come out in the spring or whatever? All kinds of great stuff. And he passed on back in, I think, 1988 or 89. And ever since, they've had volunteers or people who have handed off the role of taking the weather observations. I did a story for News 12 about 10 years ago, 12 years ago about this. And it's amazing that the rain gauge is the original rain gauge that was set up in the 1890s. You can actually see on the side of the gauge USWB for United States Weather Bureau. I mean,
really,
it's incredible that the record they have. You talk about Central Park and its 150 some odd year record. Well, this record that they've had in Mohawk is not as old as long as that, but 120, 130 years. Pretty amazing.
oh yeah, I mean that takes a lot of dedication to do it as long as some of those people have done it. Um, well, now with the automatic weather stations, it makes the work easier, but it does in a way it takes the you look at it.
Yes.
You're not checking your thermometers by hand. You're not getting the hands-on experience, but that's the way the world is these days. I thought it'd be a good time tonight, because we haven't done this in a while, is to check out the North Atlantic Oscillation. For those of you who don't know what the North Atlantic Oscillation, it's not the latest dance. It is it's measuring pressure patterns across the North Atlantic, and when they are higher than normal, okay, when the pressures are higher than normal, it's when we have a negative and North Atlantic Oscillation on the North Atlantic Oscillation Index. And the reason why it's important is that usually when it goes negative, it tends to make for some volatile weather in the eastern part of the United States, depending on the time of year. In the wintertime especially, it could mean very cold. It could mean very snowy. And right now, Joe, in the fall, when you see a negative NAO like this, it usually means it could be fairly stormy. And notice, I mean, we actually went negative sometime around the middle part of September, around the 12th to the 13th, and we've been one standard deviation negative into the start of October, but it's actually forecast now to drop to two standard deviations negative this weekend and right through the middle of the month, through the 15th, before it starts to come up, but it's still negative at the end of the forecast period. And I know the snow lovers are looking at this and they're saying, why is this happening now? Why is it, why isn't this, if it's happening now, does that mean that it can't happen, that we run out of, you're only allowed so many days for the NAO to be negative? Well, it doesn't quite work that way, but I actually kind of think that for snow lovers in the winter months to see the NAO negative like this here is a favorable sign. I don't want to say a good sign because then snow haters will misinterpret that, but and cold weather haters will misinterpret that. But it
And
is
and then they would probably say something like, "Oh, don't do that, Joe, because you're going to jinx it."
right, as if my wording. I had this conversation with Mr. Blandino the other day because he was upset that when I started mentioning about the fact that we might have problems for next weekend, that why am I being so negative? Why am I being so negative? And I basically responded as if my words work some kind of magic. By
Well,
me,
Joe, can't you wave your hands and
of
just
course, I've descended from Uncle Arthur, Joe. Of course I can. And the other big change on the Pacific North America Index, which is the NAO in the Pacific, basically, we're looking at the pressure patterns in the Eastern Pacific, uh, all the way up and across North America, is gone 2 standard deviations positive. It's going off it's rising rapidly to a strong positive reading going forward for next week and beyond. And this sort of it's going positive now, which kind of explains what's going on along the East Coast with this cold front and the two coastal systems that we're dealing with, one tropical and one not, and making that intense storm up in the Gulf of Maine.
well, there you go. And you said at the very beginning of this weathercast, not one, not two, but three weather systems coming together, consolidating, if you will. I love that term.
Yes.
To bring us some dynamic weather coming up.
We should all consolidate.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so let's check out the upper air, and this is for Sunday. I have the map for Sunday already there. You can see the deep trough. I'll just back it up so you can watch it evolve today with the upper low offshore, the little dot that's west of Bermuda. By Friday afternoon is let's call it the consolidated system perhaps, and you see the strong trough with the cold front swinging across the Great Lakes. It lifts up the ocean system and just sort of vaults it into into eastern New England. And then watch this upper low, because this is where it locks in for the whole week in eastern Canada. I mean, we're at Tuesday, we're at Wednesday, and it's still there on Thursday before it starts to open up. But at this point, we also have some very strong energy. There's a lot of troughing in the Gulf of Alaska to the west coast, and part of that comes inland into the Rockies and Plains, and then gets underneath that upper low, and you see it there. This is what Joe was talking about earlier, with a bit of a change in terms of how this evolves, because that vortex in eastern Canada hangs around much longer, so it basically becomes a sharp front rather than a coastal low. Now, that's not to say that this is correct. I mean, this is certainly a viable solution. So we'll have to just see if this is what the models are actually going to be centering on, or because there's plenty of time for this to go back to something else. If the vortex pulls out faster, you're going to wind up with a digging trough into the Ohio Valley and a cutoff low that's going to form there. It actually does eventually do that, Joe. You can see it. The bottom part of that trough cuts off in the Carolinas early the week of beginning the week of the Monday the 16th. It does finally form a cutoff low that it drags up the eastern seaboard. It takes almost 3 days.
Screaming and kicking, I might add.
Yes.
Yeah.
And after that goes by, I mean, you still have this ridge set up in northwest Canada. Another deep trough drops into the east, followed by yet another deep trough. This is if this were January, the cold weather lovers would be jumping for joy, and I would say the snow lovers would probably find things to like in this sort of pattern. But it is a much different type of setup that we're seeing in the upper air this year than we've seen in the month of October than we've seen in the past couple of years. There's no question of that.
No question. I mean, and it's very rare that you get the same type of pattern, 2 consecutive years,
let alone 3.
And 3, it's not. This is definitely not like last year. And I can tell you, I mean, last summer was very dry, and we didn't even have any walnuts. I have a walnut tree out in front of my house, and this year, not only, as I said over and over again, it's like a jungle. I've had more than my share of walnuts dropping down this year because of all this wet weather. So I'm pretty sure that if you're among those who are saying, oh, hardly had much snow last year and it's probably going to happen again this year. And in fact, there are people on this chat board, Joe, saying already, forget about winter. We're not going to see much of anything.
I want, as a winter weather lover, let them throw in the more people that throw in the towel, the better. Because the reality is that when everybody's on the same side of the trade, it's time to look at the other side. Okay, And that's what this is. Everybody, those of you who want to throw in the towel before we've even gotten to Columbus Day,
We hit 100.
the 100 like bell has gone. We got to get you a louder bell.
I know I've got a louder bell somewhere, but I mean,
You
I
got
found
to
this
you
bell
you have to
finally.
you have to get the bells that the nuns used to have that they would
Oh,
ring when it
please.
was time to change classes.
Oh no,
I
please.
bet yeah, I bet you could dig up Sister Charles Edwards' it was her bell.
Yeah, but the problem with Sister Charles Edwards is she didn't just ring it; she used it to bang it over people's heads. That's
or or put it over their heads like in a cartoon and then hit it,
right,
you know.
exactly.
All right, here's the surface and what it looks like. So as Joe pointed out, and I think correctly so, whatever's going to be around during the day tomorrow is going to be scattered and showery, and it won't last long. You see the low offshore, 1003 low southeast of North Carolina, and to the east of that, it's a little hard to see on this map, but right around, well, the GFS has it around 32 and 62. There's a closed isobar there, so that's Philippe, and then it just, basically the non-tropical low. You still see them paired off here. They're moving in tandem, and then one of them just completely takes over. And I think at this point, when we get to Saturday afternoon, if you look at the GFS, it distinctly looks like a non-tropical system. The showery rains overnight Friday into Saturday. You see the concentration of heavier rains in northeastern New York and in north central New York during the overnight Friday into Saturday, even at the Saturday afternoon. The southern edge of that really doesn't produce very much, but you also could see the heavy rains that get into Cape Cod and into the Boston area for a short time. And then the main push with the low, which is down to an 88 low, south of Yarmouth, Nova Scotia by Saturday evening, then hooks northwestward and goes right into near Bangor on this run. And all that heavy rain and that dark blue snow there north of Lake Huron on the southern part of this low. So there'll probably be some of the blue stuff or the white stuff, but it's blue on the map. And going into next week, I would tend to think that with this deep trough that's over the deep upper low that's over the eastern United States, it's probably going to mean that we're not going to have picture perfect days, Joe. I think we're going to probably see maybe some self-destructive sunshine on Sunday with a
Yeah,
gusty northwest wind.
right, right.
And more than likely the same for Monday. There's a little disturbance that moves across Kentucky and West Virginia with a couple of showers Monday evening, and then that goes out. And then we're still kind of underneath this upper low to an extent, but now you see how the GFS today handles. Uh, it brings a front near on Friday, kind of stalls it out. Then there's a low in Kentucky that goes into Virginia. Shows a lot of rain coming up for Friday into Friday night, and actually starts to pull it away on Saturday. I don't know. That's one thing. That's one thing that's possible here. If this is more frontal, it'll probably happen faster, so that maybe it gets out of the way for the weekend. If you don't have an upper low diving down and cutting off, then it's likely to come out faster and get done with faster. So this might lead you to think that next week it could be a bit more optimistic then. And there's your coastal low with the second cutoff on Monday that forms off the southeast coast and then runs northward up the coast with some rain. So the week of the 16th. But that's so far down that we're still going to try to rectify how this first system plays out.
Well, the trough for next weekend, at least if you want to believe the GFS, looks like it's a positively tilted. In other words, if you can think of a pendulum, the pendulum is swung all the way to the left and is across the Great Lakes. And we are not really, we're not in a zonal flow. We're in a very fast southwesterly flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So yeah, if we get some kind of a frontal passage through with lots of rain Friday night, with that kind of a flow, it could swing on through here quickly Saturday morning, and we could break out into sunshine Saturday afternoon. Not this Saturday, the following Saturday.
Right.
Still a lot of puzzle pieces have to come together in order for us to really set in motion what we believe will happen. But we're trying to be a little bit optimistic here for not this week or the upcoming weekend. We've had so many days, so many weekends in recent weeks where it's been very disappointing, especially Saturday. So hopefully things will get better when we get into next Saturday, the 14th, and of course
Rayo's
Friday the 13th.
Rayo's stamps goes to my analogy that I mentioned about the positively tilted trough is like a broom. You hold it northeast to southwest, and then you sweep. And that's kind of, that's the idea with those types of troughs, where they just basically, sweep things along. And when you sweep, if you hit the bottom of the broom fast enough, the dust moves faster, also spreads out. But yeah, it's the same type of principle, the same idea with regards to what the upper air looks like. But we've got the next few days, and maybe by the time we get to Sunday, we can figure all this out. In the meantime, Joe, you know what time it is, don't you?
Is it Briller Jeopardy time?
It is. It's Briller Jeopardy time. So remember, those of you on the chat board, you play along. And tonight we're going to talk about weather extremes in October in Mount Washington.
Oh.
In Mount Washington, which
God.
Hey, that's what, 6,200 feet up?
Yeah.
By the way, there was a story today about the highest peak in Europe, which is Mount Blanc, okay, has dropped by 6 feet in the last 2 years.
Well, isn't it true that as you get older, you do shrink a little bit?
You tend to bend over too.
I mean, I
just don't fall down.
I have an Aunt Irma, and I've known her now for over 60 years. And the last time I saw her earlier this year, I said to myself, "My God, is she shrinking? She's like she's like 5'1" now or something."
Yeah, no, that does happen. It's one of nature's cruel jokes, I guess.
I remember though, as a kid, when I was like 5 years old, I was at her wedding, and I remember I danced with her at her wedding. This is in 1961, and I'm looking up at Aunt Irma like having fun as we're on the dancing floor. And now, like I said, a few months ago, I saw her, and she was like, what happened to Aunt Irma?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my grandfather was like 6'2" or 6'3", and I think by the time he passed away, he was down to like 5'10", which for him, I mean, he was always this very tall, statuesque man, and well, it's what life does.
Latex streams. It's not Mount Washington, Maine. My goodness.
No, it's Mount Washington, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, yes.
Yes. So the highest temperature in the month of October ever recorded in Mount Washington.
Ever recorded in October now in Mount Washington.
October.
I'll say 52.
You'll say 52. Okay. Christinapedia, no, it's not 85.
No.
Michael Azara says 58. Joe Z says 68. Adam Lowe and Alan Rupa says 62. Maggie P says 55. Zim Beloy has 56. Bobby Whitaker 59. Carol DeCaris 56. Miss Fowlerite 63. And the answer is 62. 62.
62?
Yes.
Really?
Which was set in 2005. Wow. The lowest temperature ever in October in Mount Washington, Joe.
Yeah. So, yeah. How about the lowest temperature ever recorded in October? How about 21?
How about 21? Well, let me put it this way, Joe. If we were watching The Mountain Climber on The Price is Right, you would have not only fell off the cliff, but then you would have continued down to the center of the earth.
Right.
Let's see. Helen Bertona, just a little bit too cold at minus 120. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just seeing Tom Fox. I see your message. Appreciate you're trying to super chat, but it won't go through. Okay. So perfect. I will. Well, try it again. I mean, I don't know. It could be a YouTube issue. Sometimes if you're obviously using a credit card, and sometimes your credit card company won't let it go through if the amount isn't big enough. So, I'm sorry, I don't mean for you to add a zero to it and move the decimal point over, but those could be the two issues. Okay, Adam Lowe says 5 below. Rich Rothmansky says 5 below. Miss Fowleright says 24. Chuck Cardillo says 9 below. Sandy Blue Ocean says 2 below. Rich Rothmansky says 5 below. It is below zero, and the answer is -5.
Wow.
Record. What is the? And please don't cheat. Okay. By the way, don't Google it. All right. Mount Washington for 24-hour snowfall. The record for 24-hour snowfall for the month of October. Oh no, I skipped one. Let's do the record snowfall for the entire month of October for Mount Washington.
Well, hell, if I could get 14 inches where I live, I'm only 500 feet above sea level. What could they possibly have gotten at 6,200 feet above sea level on Mount Washington?
For the month.
For the month.
Yes.
I don't know. 45 inches.
45. Okay. Let's see. Daniel Fitzsimmons says 75. So does Adam Lowe, Michael Lazara. All say 75. Rayo Stamp says 22. Rich Rothmansky says 18. Tom Fox says 120. Christinapedia 48. Sandy Blue Ocean 45. Bobby Whitaker 66. Zimbaloy 34. Maggie P 65. It's a hard number to I'll give credit to those of you who said above 70. It's 78.9. Okay. Wow. In 2005. Okay. And
I guess I missed out if I wanted to go this weekend to Mount Washington with the car. I guess it's not something that one would try to do.
No, I wouldn't do that. So the highest temperature ever recorded in Mount Washington was in 2005. The record snowfall for the entire month of October was in 2005. And I will tell you that the next one is the 24-hour snowfall, Joe. The 24-hour snowfall, and guess what year that was?
2005?
2005, in a year where they set their all-time record high for the month of October, mind you. Okay, so the maximum 24-hour snowfall in Mount Washington. So 24 hours.
Adam, I'll say 32 inches.
32. Adam Lowe says 25. Tom Fox says 56. Tom, I was kidding about moving the decimal point. Or adding a zero. Joe Z at 16. Rich Rothmansky at 50. Ms. Fowleright 48. Michael Azara 35. Alan Rupa 23. Zimbaloy at 26. You're very, very close. So is Carol DeCara, very, very close at 26. It's Sandy Blue Ocean at 25. It was actually 25.7. Bobby Whitaker got it too, 25.7. And the final is the record wind speed. What was the strongest wind ever recorded in Mount Washington in the month of October?
Well, we know that it has the record for the strongest wind, is that like 234 miles an hour. I don't think that was October.
With higher gusts and squalls, mainly east of the center. Yeah, right. The occasional higher gust. The record wind speed, Joe.
I'll say 140 miles per hour.
140. Dan Fitzsimmons says 150. Rich Rothmansky says 160. Joey Z says 120. Tom Fox is 128. Lou Arizio says 150. Michael Azara 128. Christinapedia 125. Maggie P 195. Helen Bertona 231. Patrick Darcy 155. Joe, the answer is 161. 161 miles an hour, and that was set in 1943.
Wow.
1943. So there you have it, in a nutshell.
That was quite a nut.
Yes. All right, I think it's time we say goodnight. The weekend is upon us. Well, our weekend anyway, because you and I will be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. We hope everybody has a great couple of days ahead of them. Some plans. Not going to be the best for leaf observing if you're going up in northern New England, so you might want to schedule to go elsewhere. I have to tell you, Joe, I've got leaves in the last few days. I've got leaves covering my entire, property everywhere.
Wow.
I'm out with the blower every day to get the leaves off the deck, and thankfully it hasn't rained here now for I think 16 days or 17 days, so it's bone dry, and I don't think I'm going to get much with this cold front going through. In which case, probably going to have to wait till sometime later next week for the first substantial rain here in 3 weeks.
I'll have to say 95% of the leaves are still on the trees, for at least where I am.
Yeah, no, we're starting to see some nice color evolve here. Really, the cold nights, because every night we're down in the low 50s and 40, and we've been down in the 40s already a number of times. So it's helping to move things along. All right, excuse me. The Joe and Joe Weather Show. Whoops, I don't know how that happened, but because usually I start with the last one, but I must have clicked it by accident. The Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, and sand, and maybe start thinking about salt for the upcoming winter. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. Christmas is coming, okay? Makes a great gift. Makes a great Hanukkah gift, Christmas gift, whatever you celebrate. Get the kids a weather station. Use the referral link at the top of the chat board, and also use the coupon code and it's also on the descriptor to this video, by the way. And use the coupon code I want a weather station, because if you do, what will they get, Mr. Rayo?
They will get 10% off, Joe. How can you possibly turn on a deal like that?
And by the way, for those of you who don't know, that might be new, I'm in North Georgia. I'm in the North Georgia mountains. So I'm actually looking forward to this winter because they're forecasting below normal temperatures. Some of the climate models I looked at have actually, Joe, some of the climate models are fairly aggressive with the below normal temperatures going up north of New York City, a normal December and a cold January, February, March, and all of the mid and South Atlantic states to Florida and across all of the southern states showing below normal temperatures for this upcoming winter, if you believe some of the climate models. But I don't know. Maybe not.
Let's just stick to 3 to 5 days as our maximum. In terms of,
I mean, we could speculate beyond 3 to 5. I mean, we could certainly speculate out to 10 days if we want.
All right.
But we'll get some of our usual suspects on maybe later this month, and we'll talk about the upcoming winter, because I'm sure they will have things to say. In the meantime, have a great weekend. And Joe, do you have the super chat hitters tonight?
We have just two, but we thank them anyway. Frank Scalera and the chairman, Scott Briller.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Tom Fox, for trying. And we will see you on Sunday. Nighty-night.